I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you so much for joining us, folks, and thank you for tuning in to our fireside chat. So Key and Bexy, my co-founder here at Juno News, came out to Ontario, joined me on the family farm, and we did a great interview. We answered a whole bunch of questions. So if you haven't already, please consider going over to junonews.com, become a premium subscriber, and then you can get all sorts of upgraded premium content, including that fireside chat. Hear all about our plans to replace the CBC and how we are planning to do it. I want to talk about a bunch of different news items today. I'm going to get to this crazy story in the Globe and Mail about 17,000 criminal immigrants who the federal government, the Liberal government, removed their criminal status so that they can stay in Canada because, of course, it would be inadmissible. Otherwise, I'm going to get to that in a minute. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Canada. I know it was Tuesday. I talked about it yesterday on the show, and I put out that Dominion Day post on the day of. But I want to just sort of reflect on how the legacy media, the Liberal elites, treated our country, right? They act like they have reclaimed Canada, that Canada is back, and that it is great to be patriotic and nationalistic again. And I want to just start by saying that this is in complete contradiction to the way that they have treated our country, treated our national symbols, and treated the very idea of being Canadian for the last several years. They decided that being Canadian meant being racist, being even genocidal, that the flag, the maple leaf, became a symbol of right-wing extremism and anger. And so Ryan Gertson over on X put together this perfectly just showcasing exactly what the media has said about the flag for the last several years. You can see here different headlines. You've got the Toronto Star, Canada's flag appropriated as a symbol of right-wing rage. The Queen's University Journal, the alter ego of Canadian freedom has stained our flag. Next, we have another Toronto Star. When I see the Canadian flag now, it hurts my heart as Freedom Convoy returns. There's a tug of war over the maple leaf. Next, we have this Saskatoon headline. Convoy, federal government have shifted some people's perspectives on the Canadian flag, according to a survey. Globe and Mail, remember those who wave the Canadian flag do not get to define it for everybody else. I feel that way right now with the Elbows Up crowd. A couple more. CBC says debate over Canadian flag resumes as convoy protests return to Ottawa. And finally, the Canadian flag and Freedom Convoy, the co-opting of Canadian national symbols. So when conservatives wave the Canadian flag, it is a symbol of hatred and bigotry. But now that Mark Carney's prime minister and the Elbows Up crowd have taken it back, it is a great source of pride for these people. And that is what we got a whole bunch of on July 1st. So here is Gary Mason writing in the Globe and Mail, this Canada Day, we reclaim our flag. He writes, not a long time after, whenever you saw a truck going down the street bearing a Canadian flag, you likely thought, Freedom Convoy lover. Many of us were afraid to hang a flag outside our home on Canada Day for fear of being associated with the bunch who had occupied our capital, tried to bully our government, but not anymore. Perhaps the best thing about this Canada Day, we have our flag back. May it never be hijacked again. Okay, so we get it. That's what the Laurentian elite think when blue-collar Canadians, hardworking Canadians wave the flag. It is disgusting and outrageous. But now that we have the Oxford-educated PhD, Mark Carney in government, and he did the whole elbows up shtick, we reclaimed the flag for the Laurentian elites. It wasn't just the Globe and Mail. We have Martin Redcone over in the Toronto Star. On this Canada Day, the Canadian flag is back. He writes, the maple leaf is misappropriated no more. No longer is our flag being hijacked by a political fringe, converging in convoys on our capital, raging and rampaging against COVID vaccines. Today, our flag is finally liberated from that virus. The maple leaf has been repurposed for patriotism, repositioned as a beacon atop Parliament Hill, instead of relegated to pickup trucks blocking parliamentary precincts. These people are obsessed with the Freedom Convoy. Like one protest by not even right-wingers, right? Just regular blue-collar people who didn't want to get the jab. Regular people who were just tired of the control that the Justin Trudeau government had over all of us, said enough is enough. And these people are like obsessed with it. Like they really, really want to make it Canada's January 6th. And they've decided that anyone who was associated with that was just beyond the fray. It wasn't just the fancy newspapers. We also saw a whole bunch of TV reports like this. So here is CTV's report. Canadians reclaim maple leaf flag amid Trump threats. There definitely has been a surge of patriotism, Matthew Hayday, professor and chair of the Department of History at the University of Guelph, said in an email to CTV. Flying the flag is no longer raising the same sorts of suspicions that the person displaying it harbors sympathies for right-wing causes. Right-wing causes like loving your country and driving a pickup truck. I will show you this clip just to show you what we're up against. Here is global news. Canadians reclaiming the flag on Canada Day. Let's play that clip.
It comes after years of the flag being co-opted by protests, or the country being forced to take a hard look at its colonial past.
So you see, like, we're supposed to hate our country because they've decided, because of one hoax put out and picked up by the legacy media a couple of years ago, that we're genocidal and that we have to be ashamed of being Canadian. And yes, the flag represents right-wing truckers. It's almost like these journalists all have like a group text together and someone sent out the memo. Maybe it was Mark Carney, maybe it was someone on his staff saying, hey guys, here are the talking points for the day, distribute them. And the legacy media just did what they do, disseminate the Liberal Party message and tell their base, Canadians, people who are glued to legacy media, hey, we've got our flag back. It's okay to be Canadian. We still see through it. And guess what? The radicals out there, the people who are trying to make you hate Canada, make you think that Canada is a genocidal country and that you should be ashamed of Canada, that you should be embarrassed to be Canadian, that waving the flag is a right-wing thing. Those people were still out on Canada. They were still out on July 1st. So here, a couple of examples. The Waterloo School Board encouraged settlers to reflect. So this is a message put out on their Facebook page. It says, as we prepare to acknowledge July 1st as Canada Day, we celebrate and we reflect. We also encourage those of us who are settlers of this nation, that would be everybody, to take this opportunity to learn about Turtle Island, embrace the hard truths of our history, and make a personal commitment towards reconciliation. We have a responsibility to understand our country's history and become aware of the Indigenous roots on which it was built. Together, let's take the understanding and create a better future for all based on peace, friendship, and respect, while upholding the treaty rights of Indigenous people, the first peoples on this land. So this is like a really confused look at history, right? Like when I was in school, we learned that the natives in Canada, the people who were here before the Europeans, came across the Bering Land Bridge and that they were originating from Asia and Mongolia. And those are the people that are here today. So presumably they would be settlers too. And actually, we don't know who the first people on the land were because maybe there was another population before. We don't have that information. But to just decide that the First Nations here today are the Indigenous people, that it's called Turtle Island, I'm going to just reject all of that. If you're celebrating Canada Day, you have to reject that. And you have to say that the reason that we celebrate our country is because of the European settlers who came here and built a country and built a nation. And that is what we're recognizing. We're not talking about the millennia of wars, right? Human history is a history of warring people and tribes, and the people who win the wars are the ones who write the history and the ones who get to build the institutions. So we are literally here because of the institutions of the Europeans, of our ancestors who built this country, not because of the people who were here before them, who did not build this civilization, who did not build this country. Sure, they were partners. Sure, they were there. You know, they're part of our society. They're part of our civilization. But if they want to reject the fact that this is our country, I mean, then we have to do the same thing right back. It is ridiculous. Next, we have another person, interestingly, from the Waterloo Region District School Board. I know from Waterloo, like, what is up with your city and the people that it produces? But an anti-racism educator named Selim Debs wrote this on X. This just totally went viral, by the way, ratioed. This is what she writes on X. To celebrate Canada Day is to celebrate settler colonialism, genocide, enslavement, oppression, violence, extraction, exploitation, and attempted annihilation of Indigenous peoples, along with 250 years of enslavement of Black African peoples. Is she talking about Canada or the United States here? Because my recollection of history is that Ontario was the first jurisdiction, I think, in the world to abolish slavery some 50 years before the British Empire abolished slavery. And they were the first in the world. They actually fought wars to end the slave trade because the slave trade was still alive and well in Latin America, South America, and the United States. It was the Brits who were the first to do it. And guess what? Canada was Britain back then. So it was us. It was my ancestors and British ancestors who fought the slave trade, not our history is not that of 250 years of enslavement of Black Africans. That is just wrong. Next, she says, today should be an opportunity to teach your family, friends, and children the truth, unlearn, and give back what is owed. Hashtag land back, hashtag reparations now. Interestingly enough, uncovered by Melanie Bennett over at True North, this person gets money from our taxes, taxpayer-funded activists right here. Next, we had a student group holds an Anti-Canada Day event in Montreal. Far left McGill University group hosting an Anti-Canada Day barbecue on July 1st, according to this report in Juno News. The event, promoted on social media by the Quebec Public Interest Research Group at McGill University, of course, government-funded, taxpayer-funded. It was titled Decolonial Anti-Canada Day Barbecue and Fundraiser. Give me a break, guys. This stuff is over. Canadians are over with this. This is like peaked in 2022, and now it's on the decline. We don't care about this stuff anymore. We don't want to hear your whining. This stuff belongs on like the fringes of university campuses. I'm glad it's happening at McGill and nowhere else. Leave it on those university campuses. According to the organizers, the proceeds of the event will go to local decolonial struggles. Okay, I wanted to move on and talk about this bombshell report in the Globe and Mail. Thousands of foreigners' criminal convictions were forgiven by Ottawa over 11-year span, raising transparency concerns, written by Mary Wolfe in the Globe and Mail, published on July 2nd. This story is unbelievable, folks. It's like, just when you think that the immigration system wasn't bad enough under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, you learn about this and it just absolutely makes your blood boil. So let me just read from this Globe and Mail report. More than 17,500 foreigners had their criminal convictions forgiven by the Immigration Department over the last 11 years, removing a bar to coming to Canada. Federal government figures show disclosure has raised transparency concerns about the type of offense they committed. Foreigners are, in general, inadmissible to Canada if they've been convicted of an act that is considered a criminal offense in this country. But Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, it used to be called CIC when I worked there, it's now called IRCC, has the power to grant an exception if 5 years have lapsed since the person was convicted or finished their sentence. Okay, so if you've been 5 years without a criminal record, the department can make an exception, but it has to be a one-time exemption. They actually have to look at what your crime was. Government figures show that in the 11 years up to and including 2024, 17,600 people convicted of criminal offenses abroad were considered rehabilitated by the IRCC. This meant that they were able to apply to Canada either through work or visa studies as permanent residents or visitors. IRCC has not, however, released a breakdown of the kind of criminal offense that were forgiven. It said in a statement to the Globe and Mail that the immigration minister would be involved in decisions relating to the most serious offenses. Last year, 1,390 people had their criminal convictions forgiven by IRCC, while 105 applicants were refused. In 2023, 1,500 people were considered to have been rehabilitated, while 70 applicants were rejected. Conservative Immigration Minister Michelle Rempel-Garner said there needs to be more transparency about the type of convictions being forgiven and the circumstances of each case if the public is going to have any confidence in the immigration system's vetting process. I'm sorry, I don't speak for all the public, but I know a lot of people do not have confidence in the system. When you see a story like this, heck, even before you see a story like this, when you look at what's happening in our country with the break and enters, with the home invasions, with the car thieves, with criminals running rampant all over our country, this didn't happen 10 years ago, right? And so we know that the government just let a whole bunch of criminals into our country, and now it is being confirmed. I don't know how they can ever regain that confidence in our immigration system. I'll continue to read. There have been questions about the adequacy of vetting of many classes of people entering Canada, she said, adding that she may raise the issue at the Commons Immigration Committee when Parliament resumes from its summer break. Foreigners applying to have their crimes forgiven must show that they are unlikely to take part in future criminal acts. According to IRCC, the department considers the number of offenses and circumstances and seriousness of each one, IRCC said, as well as the applicant's behavior since the crime was committed. IRCC said it also looks at the support they receive in the community as well as the applicant's current circumstances. The decision to approve or refuse an application for rehabilitation for less serious offenses is generally made by an RCC official with the appropriate delegated authority, while decisions for more serious offenses are made by the immigration minister, said the spokeswoman Nancy Karen. Okay, this is unbelievable. So 17,000 criminals in Canada, the government just said, hey, don't worry about the criminal record. Let's just let them through. Don't worry about it. Don't look at it. They won't even give us a breakdown. Look, I am open to admitting that, hey, if someone was convicted of a crime, say like a political crime, say they're a political criminal in China, and they come to Canada and Canada says, look, we don't consider that to be a real crime. That's BS. We're going to forgive that crime. I'm here for that. I'm okay with that. That's okay. That's something that we should be doing. But that's not what's happening here. And the fact that the minister won't even say so, that they won't have any transparency, that they won't let you know how many of these people were actually violent criminals, victims, perpetrators of crimes where there are victims, like sexual assault, aggravated assault. So like we don't even know. We don't know. The fact that the ministry had to look at each individual case and the minister, I highly doubt that they looked at 17,000 cases. I just don't believe that. And so the idea that they just kind of like rubber stamped everyone, this is unbelievable. This is scary. This is dangerous. This is just reason number 10,000 why the Trudeau government was absolutely reckless when it came to immigration. They absolutely destroyed the system and our country. Let me just read a little bit more from this Globe Mail piece. To protect Canadians and in the interest of transparency, IRCC should be open about the type of convictions that have been forgiven, said Richard Curlin, immigration lawyer based in Vancouver. In many cases, particularly convictions in authoritarian states for political offenses, rehabilitating a person is justified, he said. Some crimes are minor, he added, and committed decades ago by people who have never reoffended. But, he said, applicants convicted of crimes against the person, including sex offenses and domestic violence, should face a higher level of scrutiny. If they enter Canada and cannot be removed for a considerable period of time, people could be at risk. The issue is highly relevant, he said, with people with criminal convictions facing deportations from the United States. They may seek coming to Canada. Yeah, no doubt. They read this story in the Globe and Mail yesterday and said, hey, yeah, I may be part of Pretende or some other immigrant gang group in the United States. Why would I leave and get deported back to my country when I just go to Canada? They'll probably just forgive my criminal record anyway. This is just another reason why Canada, it's just not a serious country. Like, a serious country doesn't do this kind of thing. A serious country removes people who are criminals, or hey, how about not letting them in the first place? Bringing in more screening, bringing back more checks on people, stop them from coming in the first place. It is absolutely outrageous. Okay, I want to jump to a special interview that I did with a Juno News sponsor. So let's go over to that. Okay, we're going to change gears here a little bit and talk about the green economy and many of the scams that come with it. And to do that, I'm pleased to be joined by my guest today, Jonathan Wellham. Jonathan is the founder and CEO of Rockling Investment Partners. Rockling is an independent wealth management firm that helps clients grow and protect their savings through carefully researched long-term investments in strong, stable companies. And folks, I'm very pleased to announce today that Rockling has become a sponsor of Juno News. Rockling shares our values. They are investors that share the values of Juno News and the values of our audience. They focus on disciplined, medium to long-term investments for their clients. And so Jonathan was named in the 40 under 40, interestingly, back in the 90s, and he is one of the best in the country. So Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for sponsoring our network and our journalism here at Juno News.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Candice. It's a privilege to sponsor Juno News. We really appreciate the alternative news, as I don't have to tell you. The mainstream media in Canada is really bought and paid for by the political establishment, and we need good, objective information in the marketplace. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing.
Well, you had an interesting op-ed over at Juno News the other day, the resource boom and the green agenda. You said that the green agenda is nothing but a smoke screen. The left's obsession with renewables has little to do with saving the planet, a lot more to do with controlling people's lives. A little bit of good news on that front. Yesterday, we had Brian Kingston, who's the head of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. He was heading into a meeting, Prime Minister Mark Carney, and I was pretty surprised by what he said. He said point blank that the Liberals' mandate EV targets was not sustainable and that it probably had to go. Let's play that clip.
Just here to talk about the importance of the auto sector and ensuring its continuing success.
Is the EV rebate to debt? Is the EV mandate debt?
We'll be discussing EV mandates, of course, as well as a range of other policies to make sure the sector succeeds.
Do you think that's sustainable, though?
Well, the EV mandate itself is not sustainable. The targets that have been established cannot be met, and that will be part of the discussion.
What will you be asking the Prime Minister for?
I'll talk to you when I get out.
So you heard it there, Jonathan, that the mandate is not sustainable. The Liberal government target is 100% zero emissions vehicle car sales by 2035, which might seem, in the distance, but really we're talking about 10 years. They want to get rid of gas powered cars and automobiles. It seems absurd, ridiculous. It hasn't been scrapped already. So wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, the EV mandates are absolutely ridiculous and not workable. So you can look at it, everything from the cars and how batteries operate in cold climate like Canada, and the distances that we have to drive, and the lack of technology really behind the cars, to the needs that are required in terms of mining and extracting of resources to develop the batteries, the nickel, the copper, the cobalt, manganese. You just go on and on, all of these different resources that are really not in large supply, so we have short supply on them. To the ability to plug in, and our electrical grids are not sufficient also in terms of they take all of the electrical demands. We have governments across our country in different provinces telling us to turn down the power when it gets hot now in the summertime. How are we going to plug in all these vehicles? And then you have the United States, which is our most important trading partner. We've got a lot of the cars that come from the United States. They have turned their back upon all of these mandates. And so they're not going to be producing these cars. So on every single level, it makes no sense to mandate to 2035. They should leave it to the market. There's many technologies that are developing, everything from hydrogen to EVs. There's other alternatives that will develop over time, and let the market determine the pace at which it should go. Government should get out of it. They don't have a clue what they're doing, and the money that they've put into these battery facilities in Ontario in particular is outrageous, and that's again going to be proved to be to basically take our money and to squander it. So yeah, I agree with that analysis 100%. It's not possible.
Well, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Prime Minister Mark Carney and his negotiations with President Trump, because we saw basically humiliation turnaround with the digital sales tax, which I can't believe that Carney didn't get rid of it, before having these conversations with Trump. We know that the Americans don't want these extra taxes. They don't want their industries to be punished by Canadians. So, the fact that he doubled down on it only to have to reverse under Trump, I wonder if the same thing will happen with this EV government target for 100% electric vehicles. What do you think of all this?
I do. I believe that'll be exactly the case, because it's impossible. It's not workable, and Canada can't operate in a void, in a vacuum from the United States. And when it comes to almost any industry, and what Carney did in terms of the digital tax service was just outrageous. He knew Donald Trump did not like it. The Biden administration did not like it. And then they had the nerve to put that up in front of Trump at the same time we're negotiating, and then go back a couple of years and think that they were not going to irritate Trump in the middle of negotiating tariffs, where we need to be protecting as best as possible our manufacturing sector and some of our resource sector, and having better positions in terms of leverage. And we gave that away by just being absolutely foolish. And so, again, Mark Carney is just demonstrating that he's incompetent. And I think people are going to realize that when you put a central banker into a position like that, just because they have a lot of degrees and they look like their resume's full, central bankers are notoriously big government. Their ideology is that it should be top down. They're not bottoms up. They really don't understand the free market economy. It's all about control. And that's what central bankers do. And so I think, Canadians are going to, again, continue to be shocked and horrified at the Liberal government, that it is an extension of Justin Trudeau, just with someone wearing a different suit and maybe not as fancy socks, but it's the same thing. So I think Carney will have to back off, because that is reality. At some point, reality does set in, and you cannot pretend that the reality is something different.
Well, I think for so many Canadians, that reality is settling in, that, as much as the media lauded Justin Trudeau for being progressive and woke, the impact of that on Canadians has been a sheer disaster, specifically just with the cost of living. Like, everything is more expensive because of their inflation and their printing of money, right? The mass opening of the immigration borders means that it's hard to find a place to live, and everything is more expensive. So I'm wondering if you can comment on the Liberal policies, how they have created this cost of living crisis, and what are some things that you're watching and that you hope this Carney government might do differently than Justin Trudeau?
Yeah, I think the major issue is if you're if you're influencing the economy, the government should not be running the economy. The private sector should run the economy. But if you're influencing the policies, the regulatory regime on a private economy, it should be geared to producing and production and making more things. If you're not into growing the economy and producing more products and services efficiently, more effectively, then you're going to be putting a stranglehold on the economy. So if you look at what Donald Trump is doing in the United States, what's he doing? How am I going to bring capital back? How am I going to loosen regulations? How am I going to encourage his businesses to set up shop here? How am I going to lower their costs by, drill baby drill, keeping energy costs down? That's what we should be focusing on. So what Justin Trudeau did over the last, his 9 to 10 years in power was he scared capital out of the country, put more regulations on, he increased costs of doing business, of building homes and so forth. So what's happened is, you can't redistribute that which you don't produce. And so the focus should always be on production. The biggest issue for Canada is how do we get capital back into our resource sector? How do we develop our uranium, our oil, our gas, our copper, our gold, and so forth? All of these resources, lumber, timber. How do we, again, continue to produce aluminum at the best cost possible? We've got some of the best assets in the world, but if you scare the capital away and you don't make it easy to develop these resources, of course money's going to leave the country. It's going to go elsewhere. And I think as Pierre Poilievre said in the last election, I mean, we chased 500 billion at least of capital out of the country over the last number of years. And we're paying up for that now because it's putting a stranglehold on our GDP. We're not growing our GDP. And it's hurting our productivity. And so if you're not growing and you're not being more productive and you're not putting capital in, you're going to really hurt the economy. And that's exactly what's happened. So what Carney has to do, first thing he should be doing is listening to Danielle Smith and Scott Moe and opening up as many projects as possible to develop our resources. The capital would come back and we would see a large uptick in growth in the economy over the next 2-3 years if you were to do that.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Carney's new bill C5, which really just moves to force big natural resource projects through. He says he wants to make Canada an energy superpower. It even made Danielle Smith seem optimistic. She came on my show and said that, Mark Carney seems to be nothing like Justin Trudeau. So do you think that this is a step in the right direction? Do you think he's actually going to follow through with it? Can he convince the radicals in his own party? I mean, Stéphane Guilbeault is still in cabinet. How can he circle that square within his own party? And do you think that he'll actually do what he's saying he's going to do?
And I haven't been able to look at the Bill C5 in detail, but my understanding is instead of allowing the private sector to thrive and make the decisions, it's going to be top down again. It's going to be through Ottawa. And that will not maximize the opportunity at all. And that's the biggest problem I see with Bill C5. Again, now having not looked at it in a lot of detail, but we do not want major projects going through Ottawa, and we don't want them deciding what projects are going to be developed. And we don't need Ottawa's money. And so the focus should ultimately be private sector. Let the private sector decide. They are the ones that will take the risk. They will also build these projects at much lower costs and free up the regulations. And that's, I think, really the focus it should be. Again, they have a hard time giving up that kind of power. I mean, Carney, he wants to, again, control top down, and that's going to be a big hindrance to any development of our resources.
Well, this is Jonathan Wellham, the founder and CEO of Rockling Investment. Jonathan, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about Rockling and how they can find you?
Sure. The best way to find us is on the internet, rocklink.com, which is link with a C at the end. So it's a little bit different, rocklinc.com. And you can email us just at info@rocklink.com. We're registered across all 10 provinces. We're disciplined long-term money managers. We have an exceptionally good track record. And we have clients right across the country. And so if you're not sure about your investments, not happy with your current advisor, you want someone to review your investments for free and see where you stand, then just contact us. We're all conservatives and focused on building wealth and protecting your wealth from the different challenges that we have out in the marketplace, everything from the government to inflation and so on. So we're not afraid to go into sectors that a lot of people aren't interested in. And so we'd love to hear from you.
Excellent, excellent. And we know there's lots of challenges in the Canadian economy these days. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your support of Juno News and independent journalism. And we really appreciate your time and your insights today.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Candice. I really love Juno News, and I'm glad it's expanding and having more influence in the country.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. We'll be back again soon with the Candice Malcolm Show. I'm Candice Malcolm. Thank you, and God bless.
You're watching Juno News, Canada's fastest growing independent news network. Our team works day and night to bring you nationwide coverage of the issues that matter. Honest reporting of the stories that put Canadians first. From far and wide, Juno is doing the work to turn the dial in the right direction, bringing you the news from the field and in the studio. Wherever it takes us, we get the job done. For you and for Canada. Help us replace the CBC. Subscribe today at junonews.com.